Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Roy Sheeran, lead developer at VDL Ventures, the team behind StakeNow. The StakeNow team has recently released an update for Sign In with Tezos, a library which allows developers to easily provide access control to users based on their Tezos wallets. Roy will be demoing Sign In with Tezos for us here today and bringing us up to speed on what the StakeNow team is up to in 2024 and beyond. Hi, Roy. Where are you right now and how's the weather?
Hi, Stu. I'm currently in a town called Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and it is pretty hot and humid at the moment.
Sounds pretty good.
Oh, I mean,
Um,
I could be complaining, but I'm not.
uh, I understand there have been some big changes in StakeNow's overall mandate here in the Tezos ecosystem since its inception. This has led to a rebranding of sorts. Can you walk us through the history of StakeNow and how its role in the Tezos ecosystem has evolved over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So back after like Tezos came about in the fundraiser and everything, basically we started a baker. um, all the way back when testnet was still running, and as soon as mainnet came about, we turned that into a public baker called StakeNow, and yeah, that basically was the beginning of StakeNow, and then that was back then done with by just Carlo and Daniel. And after, yeah, I'm not so sure how long that was, maybe about a year or so. I got to know them better and better, and I decided to join their team, and that's when we decided we wanted to yeah, create more applications for the Tezos ecosystem. And that's when we started building StakeNow.fi, which was going to be a portfolio management application looking at Tezos DeFi and Tezos NFTs at the time. And during that, the development of that product, we basically noticed that we wanted some sort of access control, and that um, yeah, was kind of the birth of signing with Tezos. Um, but after a while, yeah, we decided to shift a little bit and yeah, shift our focus from kind of like a B2C application to B2B applications.
Okay, and that brings us to today. And how would you describe StakeNow's current mandate and its current place here in the Tezos ecosystem in 2024?
Yeah, so StakeNow.fi has kind of been taken down a notch, and signing with Tezos has grown over the, say, year and a half, I think, that we've been working on it now. More and more options have been introduced, and we have now moved towards, like I said, a more B2B offering where we are building a permission marketplace that heavily relies on sign-in with Tezos, that kind of tries to answer some of the questions that the industry has had for us um, with regards to using blockchain in their, yeah, I want to say supply chain. So that's what we're currently mostly focused on.
Okay. And as I mentioned off the top, you'll be demoing sign in with Tezos for us here today. But before we get to the demo, I'd like to give you the chance to explain exactly what sign in with Tezos is and why it's important. So, first off, what was the problem that you were looking to solve for Tezos developers with this product?
Yeah, so every like dApp or dApp or however you want to call it, at one point we'll run into the same kind of problems to solve. And one of them is how you're going to authenticate your user. So how do you know that the user that's trying to connect is actually who they say they are? And obviously, the very simple thing is connect your wallet, and that could theoretically be it. But in many cases, you kind of want some more information or some more proof, or you actually have parts of your website that are protected in a similar fashion as any other website or application where you log in would. Um, and yeah, to make sure that that is kind of standardized and that users can trust the applications that they are connecting their wallets to, we wanted to standardize that flow a little bit. Um, and we wanted to make sure that this problem only had to be solved once and once right, and everybody else that was going to create a dApp for Tezos would be able to implement this
Hmm.
and not have to worry about this and just basically could focus on the problems that they actually wanted to solve instead of yeah,
Okay.
creating like reinventing the wheel every single time.
Makes sense. And in terms of solving that problem, how would you describe sign in with Tezos and what it does?
So I think standardization is an important part of this. We have created a couple of improvement protocols in which the standards are kind of described. It's called a chain-agnostic improvement protocol, CAIP. And what they try to do is create a set of standards that um, are carried across every single chain. So Ethereum would use a similar structure of signing messages, for instance, Solana does, and we have adapted the Tezos kind of sign-in flow to adhere to these standards and updated those standards with the Tezos specific ones. I'll describe it a little bit further when I do the demo.
Okay.
So making it easy to handle or to deal with these standards to make sure that you adhere with them properly, to make it easier mm, to implement security protocols like what's the word I'm looking for here? Sorry, I can't think of it right now. Um, but yeah, so those are all kind of steps that we wanted to create to make these things easier. And then after that, we also have a part that's called the access control query, where it would make it significantly easier to put certain rules on which users are allowed in your app and whatnot. A simple one could be if your user holds a specific NFT, then they've got access. If they don't hold that NFT, then don't give a user access. So that way you don't have to maintain subscriptions in your website. You can just completely use on-chain data, and if somebody decides to sell their NFT to somebody else, great. Now somebody else has access to your website, you don't anymore, and that kind of completely goes decentralized on chain, and all that data you don't have to worry about anymore.
Okay.
So that's the second thing that we wanted to bring to the ecosystem. And then the third thing, which actually also adheres to the standards somewhat, which is something we released recently, is OIDC integration. So if you want to, if you're building an application that uses any sort of standardized OAuth 2 or OIDC authentication frameworks or packages or whatever, you can now also integrate sign-in with Tezos with that system. And to kind of show how that could be done, we released a demo that shows how you can read the signatures, send whatever data is required to a OIDC provider, get session data back, etc., etc. Um, so yeah, I also will demo that a little bit later on.
Okay. And in terms of identifying that problem and deciding that this was an appropriate solution to that problem, was this something that you personally thought would be important for the Tezos ecosystem moving forward, or was this something that other developers were also asking for and telling you they needed?
I think it's a little bit of both. We started this product because it was something that we needed, and we thought, this could actually be helpful for the ecosystem. And then we decided to actually join a hackathon with this product a couple of years ago. And we ended up winning that hackathon with the first iteration of Sign In with Tezos. And it was actually in that hackathon that became clear that actually the developers were very much interested in what we were, or in the problems that we were solving.
Well, it's definitely good confirmation that your view that other people would be interested in this was right, winning that hackathon.
Yes, yes. And it was fun too.
That's awesome. Um, I think you've explained it kind of as clearly as it can be explained with words, but always a demo is a good way to visually get it to experience what it looks like. So let's get to that. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Let me just quickly see if I can find my screen. That would be helpful.
I think you've explained sign in with Tezos pretty clearly. So let's get to that demo. Are you ready?
I am ready, thank you. Um, so for this demo, I have gone to SIWT.xyz. Just in case that you didn't know, you can always visit this and try it for yourself, as mentioned here. So to start off with, we can start with the access control query that I mentioned earlier. So as a developer, you can create a very simple object that looks like this, that has a certain set of parameters that you can set, and then you can feed that to SIWT, and then SIWT will tell you if the connected user meets um, your requirements, yes or no. So it's built up of a few things. Obviously, there's a network you can test on GhostNet. You can or you can actually use actual mainnet to test the requirements. Then the parameters. For now, the only parameter that is required is the actual public key hash of your user or the address, and then you can build up a specific test that that will set the actual requirements. So to make it easier, there's a little interface that helps you with building that object. So let's choose mainnet for us, and to make it easy for the demo, let's say that my user needs an XTZ balance that is greater or equal to 1. You'll notice here that the type of test that it needs to do is XTZ balance. It's got a comparator of greater than or equal to and a value of 1. If I make this value 10, you'll notice that it changes.
Okay.
If I less than or equal to, you'll notice that that changes. So here, let's say that my wallet needs to contain at least one XTZ to be able to get access to the
Okay.
application.
So once you attempt to do a sign in using your Tezos wallet, you need to meet those requirements in order to be able to get through the first stage of the process.
Yeah, I mean, where you put the check is kind of up to the developer. So
Yeah.
you could choose that a user has access to everything, but as soon as it wants to do some certain actions, then you can run this test. You're completely free to put this test where you want it as a developer. There's no set requirements. So right now, this user needs to pass the test, otherwise everything stops. That's not the case. Then step 2. So now we've told SIWT, okay, these are the access requirements that a user needs to have.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that you can tell SIWT to keep into account is the policies that a user needs to agree to before getting access to your application. With most, let's say, traditional applications, we're really used to saying we have to agree to terms and conditions, and we have to agree to a privacy policy before we can actually create an account on that application or website. But obviously in Web3 that kind of works a little different. However, you're still dealing with an actual business entity in most times. So the law hasn't changed when it comes to making sure that your users understand and adhere to the terms and conditions. So SIWT makes it easy and standardized to make sure that when a user signs for basically creating an account or for accessing your website, that it also has been notified for
I see.
the policies that are required to use your application.
The ones that we definitely always read before we sign, right?
Absolutely, top to bottom, every character. Okay, and then so we've set all this, and now we can actually connect. So let me quickly. Oh, the disconnect button does seem to work. That's all right. Let's connect. Let's connect with Kukai and use the browser. I will quickly share this tab now. If everything is all right, you should be seeing my Kukai screen instead of SIWT. Perfect. So I'm going to connect. I'm going to tell the application that it's allowed to have my address. And then here you'll notice the sign-in message. And the format of the sign-in message is what I mentioned earlier. This adheres to the CAIP 122 standards. And these are the standards set throughout the entire, industry. Um, that was started by Spruce in Ethereum, so they are based on the EIP with the very specifics that were required for Tezos. And it goes as follows. The default is always starts with Tezos signed message, and then SIWT wants you to sign in with your Tezos account, and then it comes in with your account. And then by signing this message, you agree to the resources mentioned in this message. So this is, well, technically this is a free piece of text that you can tell SIWT to display. But it's these resources thing, is what I mentioned earlier, is important. These are the resources that I selected, so these are the ones that it takes with.
Yeah.
And then it has a set of variables that are required to complete the message. So you can check the URI, make sure that you're connecting to the correct application or website. The version of the message, the chain ID for us, this now mainnet, the nonce is in this case very simple. Make sure that when you implement this yourself, that you actually do use a proper implementation of your nonce.
Okay.
An issue date and an expiration time. There is a couple more optional options that you can use, but you can see those in the documentation. So I'm going to sign this message quickly. All right, so this is now signed, and I'm going to go back to the sign in with Tezos website, and then you'll notice here that the signature now displays, so we know that we've signed, and then I can check access and access is denied because I have no balance on GhostNet. So obviously by reloading, switched from mainnet to GhostNet. So let's try this again on mainnet, and now you'll see,
There you go.
yes, I have passed. So theoretically, everything is,
Congratulations.
thank you. Everything is all right. I could get access to the application. So that was a demo of two important parts, which is the access control query and the standardized message signing. A third part that I've mentioned before that is interesting to show is signing in with through an OIDC provider. So here the flow, I'm sure everybody that watches this stream is already is quite familiar with the flow. You click somewhere, sign in with GitHub, for instance, or sign in with Google or whatever you're using, and you get redirected to Google or GitHub or whatever. You fill out your credentials from them, and then whoever you choose to use will create credentials for you. So a similar flow has been implemented for sign-in with Tezos. So instead of using your GitHub credentials, you can now use your Tezos wallet and basically go through the same flow and use whatever standard OIDC or OAuth framework that you use for your application. You can use that to implement sign-in with Tezos. So to show you how that works, click here, sign in with Tezos. It will redirect us to, I mean, you'll recognize the screen. In this case, I'm connected already with one of my wallets, and I'm going to sign a message, which looks exactly the same as the one that you just saw with
Yeah.
Inkukai. So I'm going to sign that now. It is signed. You see here that I now have a signature, and that allows me to complete the sign-in. And after I've signed in, I'll be redirected back to the original website where I was trying to sign in from. And you'll notice now that I have got a completed sign-in flow. And then at this point, SIWT.xyz or whatever application that you're using could now use any standard framework, application, or package, whatever you use to restrict access to certain parts of your website. So
Okay.
that's pretty cool. It allows you to not have to build all those checks in yourself every single time you get to a page, etc., etc. So at this point, it's all standardized.
So the sign in with Tezos at this point has generated a piece of code that I can include in my app or my website or whatever to make sure that process happens every time somebody joins in.
So basically, if we look at the cookies here, you'll notice that there'll be a session cookie available for you, and that session cookie can be read by your application, your kind of like standard application, and use that for restricting access to wherever you want it. So yeah, long story short, yes. Although it's not really necessarily a piece of code,
Yeah.
it's more yeah.
Not a
Uh,
coder. Piece of
a
code is the
flow.
best I could come up with.
All right, yeah. Oh, we'll use piece of code then.
Very cool. Couple quick questions. So it looked like several Tezos wallets can be used. They can be linked to with sign in with Tezos.
Yeah, so we still rely on Beacon, or actually not quite rely on, but the theoretically sign in with Tezos happens right after where Beacon would come in. So any wallet that is supported by Beacon is by proxy supported by
Okay.
SIWT.
Okay. And in terms of the kinds of application that sign in with Tezos, the button can be added to. It's basically any application, any website.
Yeah. Basically, anything that you'd want to interact with somebody's Tezos wallet with, or that you would want to make some sort of restriction, confirm that the user that's trying to interact with your application actually owns the private key that they say they own.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that's kind of web-based on that, you can use
Okay.
sign in with Tezos for.
So could this be used to enable like a subscription model here in the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah, to a certain extent, you definitely could. It kind of depends on how you would implement this subscription. So what we for instance don't have, and what you would probably think of right away when you hear the word subscription, is kind of like automated payments. So that's not something that we took ownership of.
I see.
However, if you were to say, I want somebody to buy an NFT every year, for instance, or if you buy said NFT, you can get access for a year, then that could perfectly fine be implemented. And then yeah, as soon as then your access stops, buy another NFT, or get an NFT some other way, and then you would get immediately get access again. And that, yeah, like I was
Interesting.
trying to say earlier, that completely happens um, asynchronous of the application that's implementing. So that's really cool in my opinion.
Yes, it is. And I know you mentioned bringing this forward and winning a hackathon with it. But what's the response been like to sign in with Tezos from developers so far since you've launched it?
Yeah, actually pretty good. It's uh, I really enjoyed the fact that something that I built or we built for us is also yeah, quite welcomed by other developers, that they
Yeah,
kind of see value in the work that you've done, and are now using it themselves. That's really cool to see. And then when you interact with other people and say, "Ah, yeah, yeah, thanks for building that." Yeah, that's. Uh, I mean, I
excellent.
don't want to say it's better than money because I still got to eat, but it's a very close second best.
That's fair. That's fair. This is all great stuff so far. I'm really excited to learn more. But before we dive into the nitty gritty, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
I'm not sure if I am, but let's do it.
There's only one way to find out, right?
Exactly.
Okay, it's officially lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers. This is just for fun, so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
As ready as I'm gonna get.
Are you a night owl or an early riser?
I think I'm gonna have to go with a semi-early riser
Fair,
because I definitely don't do the late. Well, I do late nights, but I don't do midnights anymore. But
fair enough.
I also are slow to start.
Exercise or naps?
I want to say exercise, but I gotta go with neither.
Neither. Okay. Chicken or fish?
You can wake me up for a piece of raw tuna anytime, any
Okay.
day.
What's your favorite country to visit for vacation?
I'm gonna have to say South Africa.
Cool. Never been, but I hear great things.
Oh, it
If you
is
were
worth
elected,
it.
sorry?
It is worth it. It's worth everything.
Okay. If you were elected king of the world, what's the first thing you would do?
Tezos to or XTZ to 100.
Sounds good to me. Name one thing you will never do again.
That's a good one. What will I never do again? I don't immediately have an answer for you.
We can move to the next one if you'd prefer.
Let's do that.
What's the secret to happiness?
Barbecue.
Okay. Do you have any pets?
Yes, I've got two doggos, or we've got two doggos.
What are their names?
One's called Z, short for Zeus, and one's called Bella.
Zeus and Bella. And finally,
Yes.
what's your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Code.
Thank you. Those are I always laugh when I hear that. I hear that so much. Thank
Wow.
you. Those were excellent answers. This concludes the Tez Talks lightning round. Let's get back into it. Are there any applications involving signing with Tezos that your team is currently working on?
Yes, actually. As I briefly touched on earlier, we're working on a permission marketplace. And the idea around that is that, yeah, basically there's no single entity that collects personal data. Or there is actually a central entity that collects personal data, but it is very it relies on verified credentials, and this one entity can um, provide verified credentials, and using these verified credentials, you now have access to a wide array of applications that are happy to accept those verifiable credentials or verified credentials. Um, and yeah, this entire flow, we rely heavily on yeah, a little bit of an updated version of sign in with Tezos.
So, are you talking about a process that a thing that would kind of eliminate the need for taking pictures of the front and back of your driver's license and that kind of stuff to verify yourself?
Yeah, so that is kind of like a business problem that needs to be solved by the entity, uh, the one entity that kind of um, provides the first layer of verifiable credentials. So if they still require that, then it would still need to happen.
Yeah,
But for every kind of client or network of applications, these requirements are different.
yeah.
The idea being that the entities that have to do this are public entities to start with. So we're not necessarily requiring personal information of actual users, but only from like a business level. And then these businesses can then provide verifiable credentials to those users. And so this kind of then central entity that provided the first layer will have zero knowledge of the second layer, and it's the second layer that are the actual users. So because of this tier, there's no more central entity that you have to rely on to keep your personal information safe, because that kind of requirement has been taken out, and we can still know for a fact because of this verifiable credential that when you log in, you actually are who you say you are, and we can then provide tiered access to whatever is required. Yeah, and by basically acquiring one verifiable credential, you can have access to any application that is willing to accept it, whether or not this application has been built by us or by somebody else. And whoever else has built this application also doesn't need your personal information because they can,
Mm.
by tree, know that this person is who they say they are and that they should be getting access.
As long as they trust the central collecting agency,
Well,
right?
as long as you trust the tree, like
I see.
the hierarchy going up. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. So we touched a little bit on StakeNow's ongoing evolution earlier. I'm wondering if I can get you to expand on one of the points a little bit more. You did mention that sort of the crux of the change is an increasing focus on solving problems for brands using blockchain. Um, first of all, do I have that right? And second of all, why did your team feel like that should be a bigger part of its focus?
Yes, I think you've got that completely right. We have shifted our focus largely towards business offerings because we got uh, actual demand for some of the products that we're using, and yeah, we kind of involved in uh, with very domain specific knowledge and already kind of being in SIWT and moving towards verifiable credentials, we were kind of like very well equipped to help uh, these brands or these companies in like, yeah, what do you want to call it, the industry, to solve their problems for them.
Okay.
And it seemed like a very interesting kind of path to take.
Yeah. It's certainly it's certainly something I've heard a lot more of over the last year. I'm getting the impression that a lot of blockchain entities, not just here in Tezos, but sort of across the blockchain world, have begun to prioritize developer and brand experience a lot more. Why do you think that is?
Um, well, I'm kind of hoping, maybe hoping is like too little of a word, but I get the feeling that there is kind of a growth within business players that are now finally really starting to kind of see and find out that blockchain can actually help their business. Um, and it's not just a bunch of degens trading memes and pictures of frogs and whatnot. And that there's actually some proper value to be created for somebody and for businesses and for the communication between businesses, because obviously there's a lot of distrust between companies. Like you don't want to always like show your secrets, but you still have to work together. So there's always this little bit of friction, and there's many places where technology like blockchain could improve that. And I think we've gotten to a point um, where businesses are much more interested in exploring that and trying to find out what can happen that goes further than a relatively simple POC.
Yeah.
And obviously, that also then immediately creates the need of teams that can solve these problems and that can support these businesses that want to do that. Um, and yeah, we are now very much trying to be one of those teams, or actually are one of those teams at this point, because yeah, the products that we've released recently, unfortunately, still kind of on the down low, but they are already doing what they're supposed to do.
Very cool. Um, it's obviously been a interesting and tumultuous time in the blockchain space over the past couple of years. From the perspective of a builder like yourself, what's it like to be creating products in this arena in 2024?
Um, it's it's a loaded question. I think it's a very much a swing between interest, like you're working with very new, a very exciting, a very fast-paced technology, and that is one of the things that I keep enjoying. However frustrating it is, because sometimes you just kind of you miss a little bit of documentation, and it gets extremely frustrating to find out or to solve problems that you've got. Um, but it's still, yeah, I personally really enjoy being on the forefront of these types of technologies. Um, and for some reason, I just really like blockchain and the concept of blockchain and what I think blockchain could mean for the world much more interesting than some other of these fast-paced technologies, like for
Yeah.
instance AI and stuff like that. So, but that's obviously my personal kind of preference. Um, but yeah, the kind of like downside of that is like sometimes the crazy valuations and the crazy money that you see moving around on things that seemingly are based on like hot air or sometimes even worse. That is also kind of frustrating a little bit.
But
It doesn't.
that's certainly not unique to blockchain. I think we see that all across tech, right?
Yeah, yeah, but maybe just also because I'm so like involved in blockchain that it
Exactly.
kind of like I see it extra more than anywhere else. But
Of course.
if you see some of these things, like I can't fathom how some of these things work,
Yeah.
especially given like it's not necessarily been easy for us to get funded, and then if you see these amounts of money flying around for what seemingly is nothing, it's uh that's kind of like the other side of the spectrum.
Okay. Fair enough. I know you mentioned there's a couple of things on the down low, as you put it. But what's next for the Stake Now team? Do you have any other exciting announcements or rollouts in the works?
Yeah, there are actually, and by the time that all of this stuff is properly done and demoed, everything will be released. Hopefully open source, but I gotta put a big hopefully in front of that. But yeah, there are a couple of very interesting things that I think are going to happen the second half of this year and with a little bit of luck the first half of next year as well. But yeah, unfortunately, can't really tell too much about that in detail.
But something's
Uh,
coming, right?
Aside from the fact that it's mostly based on identity verified credentials and access control. So a lot of the stuff that we've been working on with SIWT as well.
Okay. We could go on all day, but sadly we're coming to the end of our time here. For our viewers, if you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. Roy, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks working to build useful tools like signing with Tezos and smoothing out the speed bumps for brands and developers working to realize their creative visions here in the Tezos ecosystem. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we sign off here?
Yeah, and always just if you happen to want to try out SIWT and you've got questions or requests, feature requests, or anything, please feel free to either open up an issue on GitHub, but we're also always quite responsive on the Tezos Dev Slack. So if you want to get in touch with us, if you've got questions, requests, anything, please feel free. We'd love to help if you're happy or if you're working with SIWT.
Perfect. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Roy Sheeran, lead developer at VDL Digital Ventures, the team behind StakeNow. Now
Thank you,
let's
Stu.
go sign in with Tezos.